Carrie, it's so nice to see you after what feels like so many years, but really, I just looked back and it's really only 2019 that we last really connected. We had you on a panel at Disrupt Series Chicago. I think it was a couple years before that that maybe you were an attendee and we started to get to know each other. And at the time, if I remember correctly, you were working in workplace analytics for Capital One, I want to say. Did I get that right? Something like that?
Yeah, a little bit. Workplace solutions at Capital One.
Workplace solutions. Okay.
Yeah.
I think the panel may have been workplace, some analytics and data potentially
Yes.
panel. That's what it was.
I think so. Yeah. So, wow, 2019, there has been a lot of life lived since then. So it's great to catch up again. Thanks so much for having me on your show. So I have been in and around the commercial real estate space for about 20 plus years. And recently, though, made a big shift in my life. 2 years ago, I resigned and started my own company called Transform Wellness. And I am a health and wellness coach working with professionals to help them deal with the stress in their lives, to help them not feel burnout, feel anxiety that sometimes crops up. And as I tell my story, a lot of the feelings that I have felt are probably very common to a lot of people. In fact, I know they are. Most of my clients, that's exactly their story as well. And it's just been an absolute delight to be able to help people where they are and to go from a feeling of just surviving and kind of getting through life to actually where they can thrive in what their purpose is.
That's incredible. It's a major, major difference. Yeah, tell us a little bit about what was, if you're willing to, however much you're willing to share, what you were going through at that time in 2019, which I didn't even know that you were going through all of that. I was excited to have you participate and you were able to share so much knowledge and insight with us and my audience at the time, but I had no idea what was happening in your life behind the scenes. And it's just a testament to really never know what's going on with somebody and to give people grace.
Yes.
Because you really don't know. So talk to us. What was going on at that time? How did you get here?
Well, so, I went to school to be an industrial engineer at Purdue and set my sights on corporate America right off the bat, and only then worked for big companies. I interned at Disney and IBM, and I went to work for Motorola, actually down in near Fort Lauderdale. So I know your neck of the woods pretty well. After Motorola, I went on to United Airlines, and I was there for about 11 years. And then I was at Capital One for about 4 years, and I loved it. I had amazing experiences for all of those different roles and always taking on more. But my personality is such that I was always like, go, go, go. I was very much I am very much a perfectionist. And, that was something, kind of a recurring theme I would hear even from, in performance reviews and so forth about you push really hard, which is great because you get great results. But I also push my team really hard too. And so that was something I needed to work with and dial that back. But that's just kind of very characteristic of my personality. And, so that means I'm running on adrenaline for a lot of what I'm doing and just pushing. And even when I was tired, I would just go, go, go. And I just wouldn't continue in that path. And kind of funny, one of the subcontractors I'd worked with when I was at United, their nickname for me was the Machine. And I don't think I was supposed to know that. Somebody let it slip on a conference call one time that's what they called me. And I was like, I took it as an honor. Like, wow, they think I'm so indestructible, that I work so hard. But I don't think that's really I don't think it was a compliment, But that's just kind of a glimpse into just my work ethic and the way that I approached work and the way I approached life. It was just go, go, go. But because of that, then I would take on so much, both from a work perspective and, charities, nonprofits, always visiting family, keeping in touch with people. But I just had a lot on my plate. And so a lot of times I would end up feeling overwhelmed by just how much I had going. It was like I had all these spinning plates and I had to keep running around, keeping them spinning while I was at the same time running on the hamster wheel. And I just felt like I'm exhausted. Sometimes looking to the left and the right of your competition. Like you want to, you got to keep running to keep up. And sometimes it was just like, it was just so disheartening to think like I couldn't catch my breath. I knew this wasn't sustainable, but I wasn't really sure what else to do because everybody around me had a very similar hectic lifestyle. And, so I just kept running, and thinking, well, eventually I'll figure it out. And, looking back now, I can see what's happened to me, and I'll go into that a little bit. But, I wasn't taking care of myself because I was so busy doing, really important stuff. I wasn't eating properly. I would just kind of eat airport food here and there or go out for, really nice business dinners that were really rich in food, had a lot of sugar, caffeine got me through the day, the alcohol, and then all of that would then disrupt my sleep. So I wasn't sleeping well. And then, of course I didn't have time to exercise because, I had too many things to do. At least this was what I told myself. And so this was just a pattern of my lifestyle. And I was always going to be working out the next day. I would put the blocks on my calendar and, I was going to carve out that time, but then I'd give that slot away to a meeting. And I just,
So relatable.
I do it all the time. And so that's where it's just like tomorrow. And at some point, I knew, well, I didn't know at the time. I just thought that's just how I am. In 2018, I had a series of really big kind of catastrophes happen, just one right after another, where my dad had cancer. I changed jobs, which is a good thing, but also produces stress. And right as I was starting the new job, I had to have emergency back surgery. And so I actually had to go on disability before I even started that job. I then was having problems with my marriage of 13 years, and we ended up getting divorced. My dad passed away, and then 2 weeks later, I had a flood in my condo that caused complete destruction of all my floors. I had to move out to a hotel. 9 floors below me were also affected. I mean, it was like a big deal. And I just sat in my living room that next morning, and I just was like, okay, God, like, you've got my attention. I don't know what else to do. Like, there's just, it's so much to take on right now with all of these huge, big catastrophes. And so I'm open to what it is you want me to do, but I didn't know what that meant. And so I started, kind of clean sheet in 2019 and just was like, okay, remake my life. Like, I still, I had that job, which was great. I was still in Chicago at the time, and I just started putting one foot in front of the other and just being very open to, what is going to be changing. I wasn't sure what that looked like. So time went on. I ended up meeting someone who has since become my husband, and then COVID happened. Right. And I think for me, it helped me go from, part of my hectic lifestyle had been 150 nights in a hotel because I just was always on the road. I had an international portfolio when I was at Capital One, and so I was gone, and I loved it. United also, I had international. I love travel. I love cultures, languages, everything. So it was super fun and very rewarding, but I wasn't taking care of myself at the same time. And so COVID forcing me to be at home, then I realized this is like, I didn't have that constant like adrenaline peak of going on a trip, doing your work there, and then coming home, getting ready for the next trip, spike again. So I was constantly in this cycle. And now it was just like, I was just home. And in Chicago, everything was shut down. There was nothing to do except take walks and divvy bikes. Got to know the city through divvy bikes. So my significant other and I, we would bike all over the city, and we would cook. So like a fun activity on the weekends, since everything was closed, was to go to the grocery store, buy these exotic ingredients, and then make an amazing meal. And so just really kind of scaling back my life and recognizing that simple, there's really good stuff out of that. And so as talk continued about going back to the office and, getting back to regular life, I actually didn't want to go back to regular life. I was like, I've found a new way of living that is better for me personally, that does not involve being tied to a particular place. And, with the nature of my role at the time, I was in sales at CB. I didn't have to necessarily go into that particular office because I supported, the whole world. So I was very fortunate that I could work from anywhere. And so that's when my now husband and I decided to move to Sarasota, Florida. And so this is actually one of the beaches nearby where we live. And so it was such a big cue for me to remove myself from Chicago, where I had grown up as a professional there. And so everything I knew was that same hectic work approach. I knew that for me to make changes that would actually stick, I needed to be in a different place. So I'm looking out the window at palm trees and water. Like it's just a very different thing than we're looking out at the concrete jungle.
What was it? Isolating in my apartment, during COVID for months on end. You just don't leave except to go to the grocery store and cook yourself a meal.
Right.
And in New York, you were lucky if there wasn't a brawl breaking out in the grocery store at the time. It was a major change to decide to move down to Florida. So I'm in Fort Lauderdale, of course, a different part, but I'm looking out on palm trees, and yeah, it's a little bit of a city. There's development. I'm looking at cranes right now, and this city is a major kind of, I won't say up and coming but there's a lot going on here. There are so many new developments happening here.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible, but it's a slower life. Even in a city, it's a slower life, which takes some adjusting for sure, because that urgency, that immediate need for satisfaction when I was moving down and looking for an apartment and nobody would call me back. Like, don't you want to rent me your apartment? Or, stuff like that. It's a little bit of culture shock, but I think in the best way. So I really resonate with everything you're saying. I haven't visited Sarasota though. I do have to.
Well, you'll have to come over. Yeah.
I will. So talk to me about today and the work you're doing now, and then some of what it feels like to be in this new chapter.
Yes.
In terms of your health and.
Well, so the part about getting from Chicago to Florida was actually a really kind of the linchpin of this whole change of course that I've had. And so we made the decision to move, and that's a big stressor. Moving is a huge stressor, right?
Huge. Especially cross country.
Oh yes. We got engaged right around that time. I sold my condo. I lost my grandfather in the middle of that. We had several real estate transactions related to his estate. So there was a lot of stuff that then kind of bunched up right there as we were getting ready to move. And so all of a sudden I felt like I had this very strange thing where it was like I had burnt my mouth on hot coffee. And I thought, after a couple of days it'll go away. It continued on for months. And so we're literally driving from Chicago down to Florida, and my mouth and tongue are completely on fire. It hurt so bad. And I eat very spicy food. My husband's Mexican. Like, we eat like really hot chilies and things like that. And I couldn't even have ketchup. It just was so painful. So when I got down here, there was a farmer's market, and there was a woman who is an herbalist, and she had a booth, and out in front of her booth talked to me about a tongue reading. And I'm like, well, if this is like palm reading, I'm not into that at all. But my tongue is on fire, and I don't know why. I don't know what to do, and I didn't have any doctors established down here yet. Right. And so I went up to her, stuck out my tongue, and she's like, do you have a lot of stress? And I was like,
way. You were kidding me.
Let me tell you about my life for a second. And she's like, you are just, your adrenal system is completely tapped out. Like, your nervous system has been on fight or flight mode for so long. And so that's what got me thinking. I'm like, okay, well, that's adrenaline. And, I've heard of, stress is not good for you. Everybody knows that. But I never really thought about how that was impacting me. And so then I started meeting with her, and she started teaching me about all these different elements of my lifestyle and how they either are helping or hurting my life. And as an engineer, I'm very analytical. And so I was like, this is amazing. Like, you're blowing my mind. Do you have, you know, a syllabus or an outline of all these things that you could teach me? Because I just love, I'm going off on tangents on the internet. And I ended up enrolling in the Institute for Integrative Nutrition.
Cool.
And
I
which
love
some
that.
of you, yeah, you might have heard
Yeah.
of. And I was still doing my corporate job. I was just taking this course because I thought it was interesting. So I'm going through the course, and I just would like, my mind was being blown all the time. Just all these different things, like concepts like grounding and like being in, actually having your bare feet on grass. And I'm like, what? Like, that's a thing? Breathing, like, really, breathing is going to reduce your stress?
Yeah.
Again, like, yeah, it does. And so that's when the light bulb came on. Like, this is what I want to do. Because if I would have known a lot of these things that, kind of sound a little far out when you first hear them, but as you start researching and learn more about it, it's so tied together. So I love this analogy of, if you think of uncooked spaghetti, it's very straight and vertical, and you can put it in neat little piles. And that's how I kind of thought about, like, here's my sleep, here's my food, here's my exercise, here's my job. But in reality, all of those things are like a big bowl of cooked spaghetti. They're all intertangled, interwound, and it's hard to find, like, one is going to affect the other. And
Right.
so I just love that illustration because it really helps you kind of to see how all of the facets of your life come together. And that was one of the things in this program that I went to, talked about all of these different facets, whether it's your career, your health, the food you eat, the stress you have, the physical activity, your relationships, creativity. Are you having any creativity? Your spirituality, and ultimately joy. What joy are you having in your life? And so I decided this is what I want to do. I want to help other people who come from similar background as me, professionals that are, just go, and help them to kind of make sense of how they can make some changes in their life so that they're not just surviving and getting through, but they can actually live a joyful, thriving life.
That's huge. It's incredible. Grounding and nutrition and getting sunlight in your eyeballs, especially down here in Florida, we have that available. I mean, not these days. I don't know about you, but it's been raining here every single day. But it makes such a difference. And so, where are you now with your journey, with having learned all of that?
Yes. So, I mean, the neat thing about health and wellness is you never arrive. It's like, just when you learn one thing, then it's like, okay, now I'm on to the next thing. And at the beginning, it can be overwhelming how many things you could change, like, chemicals in all the products you use, for example, or, chemicals in all the cleaning products we use, artificial ingredients in our food, and in the toxicity of cleaning products in our air. And I mean, it gets a little overwhelming. And so I've definitely been on a journey of making changes that are small and they build over time. And so that's what I work with my clients on is, don't take on 25 things that you want to work on at the same time. Like, pick a couple of things that are areas where you would like to make progress. And then we work together on how they go about doing that. And so sometimes, I'll have to reel them back in a little bit, that if they've never worked out ever and they're like, okay, I'm going to start working out 5 days a week starting tomorrow. That's probably too big of a goal. And you're probably not going to do it right off the bat. So maybe start with just do 1 day a week and get that under your belt and then increase that. I mean, it sounds really basic, but a lot of these things we need some support and accountability around us in order to actually make change. And so, if you think about it, a lot of people in our industry, we're very accustomed to making strategies and plans of how we're going to achieve like this goal. And you have to do this to work up to it. But we don't do that for ourselves. We really put ourselves last. Yeah. And so
I'm glad you're bringing this up.
Yeah.
I think that people can get overwhelmed, especially, it's like the gift and the curse of the internet, YouTube University, and, social media, because you have these younger generations that really care and prioritize health. There's a deeper understanding of the generations before us and how they've created toxicity in our soil and in our air and in our water and all of these systems that are made to take care of ourselves. Even, you grow up and then you all of a sudden have to go to the doctor and you're like, what kind of healthcare system is this? This is not helping me. This is just in case I have a boo-boo or in case something went wrong. They don't know what happened to your tongue. They're not like, hey, let me do a stress test because your tongue and mouth feels like it's up.
That's exactly.
Maybe take some meds and hope that it goes away, but then you end up with 10 other side effects and you're like, you feel hopeless.
Yes.
So and unless you're somebody who understands how to advocate for yourself, it can be quite hopeless. So I feel like there's this double-edged sword of being in an era where we have so much access to information and possibilities and opportunities to learn through courses like IIN or any of even just plenty of naturopathic MDs, holistic doctors that are on social media, on YouTube, talking about, best practices and things we can do to help ourselves just for, hopefully for the greater good, because they have that knowledge and they share.
Yes.
But it is that double-edged sword of where do you start? And you can be so overwhelmed that there's a hopelessness in that where you feel like you have to overhaul your whole life. You have to quit your corporate job. You have to move to Florida. You have to do all of these things. And I don't think that that's the case. And I don't think that that's what you're suggesting.
No.
So what would you say to the Carrie a few years ago, 2019, that was in that really difficult spot? What would you tell her? Obviously, sorry, 1 second. Are you able to still hear me and see me?
Yeah.
Okay, that's weird. What would you tell her if she wasn't ready to overhaul her whole life and move to Florida and quit her job and all of that stuff? What are those few things that you could have done or that you would have helped her see and realize that could have been actionable and impactful?
Yes. Well, and I'm glad you went there, because that's one of the things that I actually experienced earlier this year. I was in a period where I was going for my national board certification. And so I was coming up against an application and I had to have so many coaching hours in to do that. And then I had to study for the test and take the test. And I had several programs, I had lots and stuff going on. And I started feeling a very familiar feeling, overwhelm, stress. And I'm going, what? How could this happen?
I quit the job.
I thought the problem was my corporate career. And it wasn't the problem at all. And I worked through that and realized I am the problem. The common denominator here is me and my approach of how I do work, how I kind of do anything. It's with an intensity that is not actually required at that level. I thought it was, but I was the one really putting myself at that, up against the wall, and kind of the knife against my back was actually being held by me. And so what I would say to the Carrie from 2019 is, you got to take it down a notch. It doesn't have to be that way. And so things like getting your food choices under control, not tanking up on caffeine to get through the day, because that's going to affect your sleep. And so for, if you're having to have that, 3:00 coffee and something sugary to give you that boost, that's a broader problem. Not ignoring those signs from your body, really listening to it, or, thinking of exercise in a different way. So I always kind of associated exercise with junior high PE class, which was not a great experience. I hated it. And I just never liked locker rooms and that whole thing. So I just kind of was never really into physical activity. I always associated it with getting sweaty and having to change clothes. And I got into yoga. I love yoga, but I couldn't really do that throughout the day. And I wasn't a morning person. And so then I was like, oh, I'll do it after work. And then if someone said, hey, you want to go for happy hour? Well, that sounded a lot more fun than going to hot yoga. And so it's making those little choices though. Like going back, I should have chosen the yoga instead of choosing the happy hour because, obviously there's all these benefits of the yoga and all these, not wonderful things from the cocktail. Although, having relationships with people that was a positive thing, but you could also do that in other ways.
Well, it's interesting that you bring this up because I find, especially living in New York, and it's different doing business down here in Florida, of course, but especially living in New York, that is where you're going to socialize and build relationships, which of course commercial real estate is all about relationships. And, for the most part, you have business done at cocktail hours, at dinners, and on the golf course.
Yes.
And you weren't finding me on the golf course. So that's where you were going. And I had lived in Boston, I had lived in Maine, I had lived elsewhere for so many years, but I'm from New York. Most of my audience from Disrupts area is based in New York. That's where, my connections really were. So when I moved back, I was saying yes, to as many things as I could. And I found myself drinking alcohol in a way that I never did or ever really cared for. But you do it as, part of that socialization and part of almost like doing well at your job. And I think it's something that's starting to change because of these new generations who are more about the mocktails and the adding things to our health versus the taking away, who want to choose yoga over the cocktail hour, but will still go to the cocktail hour for the sake of their career. So they'll make different choices. And so there are more young professionals that I find that are choosing seltzer and lime at the cocktail hour. That's perfectly appropriate. But so it's just, I think culturally in our industry and probably many industries, quite common and something that I was always trying to find a balance for. And, I started doing this in my early days and now I'm in my and I have no problem saying no and making those kind of different choices. But at the time when you're starting out, you feel compelled to participate in a different kind of way. So I think those are some of the harsh realities of just growing up and gaining confidence and saying no and knowing that there's, other pathways to finding those relationships and developing connections.
Yes. No, that's definitely the case. And it is funny how a lot of the things that are very cliche, until you experience them yourself, you don't really put stock into them. And that comes with wisdom as we mature. But I think as we do gain that wisdom, it's important then to share that with other people. And that's what I really hope to accomplish with going into coaching and helping other people kind of avoid some of the things that I went through and realize you don't have to, completely do a big shift of your career. Just make some small changes. And it's been so rewarding to work with people who have really said I don't eat vegetables. I won't eat vegetables. And now they've expanded their repertoire of things that they eat and are eating healthier and taking time for themselves and carving out time. And so, that's one of the things for health coaching, because it's kind of a newer thing. Not a lot of people really know about this industry, but it's kind of it's like a personal trainer, therapist, a nutritionist, a life coach, a career coach, it kind of all rolled into one. So since this is a real estate thing, you'll get the analogy really well. As a health coach is like a general contractor. And all of those things I just mentioned are the specialist subcontractors that are super important that the general contractor does not know the ins and outs of electricity and HVAC and all of that sort of thing. But they know how it all needs to go together. And so that's really how health coaching can really benefit somebody, because you're looking at all of these things in that big spaghetti jar. And
spaghetti all intertwined. 100%.
Exactly, it's all intertwined. And it's causing professionals to actually carve out time for themselves. So instead of that hour that you block on your calendar that, okay, I'm going to have me time, and then you just give it away because you're only hurting yourself. If you have an appointment with your health coach, you're not going to give that away because there's a bit of accountability there, right?
Sure.
And and having someone in your life that's going to ask you, well, you said you wanted to work out one time this week. How did that go? Well, I didn't get it around to it this week, but next week I'm going to. There's something about having to voice that to another human that actually causes you to change your behavior that's only for yourself. Because not for me. Like your focus doesn't rely on if you worked out or completed your goal, but it really helps you get some traction around what you yourself are wanting to do. And I love kind of describing it like this. A health coach is your Switzerland. So a neutral party who is not your best friend that you're hanging out with on the weekend and is not your family member that, you don't want to necessarily unpack some of this difficult stuff in your life, but it's someone that you build a relationship with and history. And so you can talk about those hard, you can talk about the frustrations you feel at work or the challenging relationships that you may have in your family. Like obviously, like you've got to be able to kind of unpack some of these things to get them out and just talk about them. It's super healthy to do that because that's another place where stress comes from. If you just kind of hold all of that in and not get it out, that is as stressful as,
Right. I think especially as women in this industry, in commercial real estate, because we are such a minority, I think it can feel like we have to have we have to present a certain way. We have to be really, not emotional. I mean, I think this probably rings true across many industries, and probably, women tend to feel like this generally. We can't show our, emotions. We have to be strong. We have to, push through. We have to be a machine, right? And our spaghetti has to be balanced, and we have to be taking care of ourselves. And so, you don't want to look too feminine because you won't be taken seriously, but you don't want to present as masculine because you're a woman and that's beautiful. So I think there's a lot to it. And I think that what we're learning more and more just with, conversations like this one, conversations with, MDs online that are sharing this information. There's so much talk of adrenal fatigue, high cortisol, hormone imbalances as a result of not eating properly, running on stress, running on adrenaline, not taking, restful time. And I think that especially as, not just as women, but as entrepreneurs, as founders, especially, early days of starting a company, you're so easy to put yourself last, not even second, but last. I can imagine potentially being a parent, what that must feel like, and juggling a career and all of that kind of stuff. So it's hard to put yourself first. And I think that there's a lot of guilt around it for a lot of people. I think that there's, potentially some shame and feeling like, I should have been more productive today doing this, or I didn't get to this task, or I didn't get to, sit at breakfast with my child or whatever it was because you decided to take time for yourself. But I think that ultimately that's an investment that feeds the people around you, aside from, of course, your own well-being, which is necessary. That feeds how well you're performing at your job. And from a longevity standpoint, it feeds how much you can show up in your family or in your relationships, or how much energy and if it feels good that day to exercise, and maybe that's going to help you build a behavior versus man, I drank 4 cups of coffee today and now it's 3:00 and I have to do a workout, and instead I just want to face plant into the floor and eat a croissant, and my blood sugar is going to drop even worse in 30 minutes from now than even how I feel. So I think that there's a lot to it. But I think that we have to really, whatever that time is, and especially if you live in a city like Chicago or New York and you feel like you just don't have that time, you have to make the time.
You have to. I think one of the most important things, though, is to really take a step back and define what are your true purposes. Why are you doing all of this? Why do you have this big, full life? Really zooming out and making sure that you understand what it's all for. Because if it's just for money and power, that's going to all go away. And I think in this industry, it's hard because sometimes we forget that, because there's a lot of potential there. You know, there's a lot of opportunity. And so we go off chasing things. And the worst thing is if you scale that mountain and you get up at the top of the mountain and you look around and you're like, I don't like this view. Like, I just have spent all this time and sacrifice climbing the wrong mountain. And so really taking a true, deep, introspective look of what do I want my life to be about? What do I want my legacy to be? And making sure then everything that you do supports that. If you don't get that right, you won't get all the rest right. And then you'll just be running around tactically doing all these things. But like thinking about your life as a strategic plan, you know, like having a bigger view of that.
It's so powerful what you just said. It's so true, especially in the commercial real estate industry or a lot of these really high-powered industries where there's a lot of potential to feel that you made it, that you're at the top, that you are that leader, that you're an executive, that you built that building or you were part of building that. There's so much to chase. And then you get there and you look around and you're like, is this what you're like, maybe this is what in college I thought that I wanted. And you spent the last 15, 20, 30 years really going for it until you pick your head up and realize that's not even the person that I am anymore. You know, this is not really fulfilling me in the way that I thought all these years that it would make me feel once I got here.
Yes.
So it's really powerful. I have two more questions before we let you go for the day, but one is more on the workplace side because you have such incredible experience. Are there things that you think, and I know you've worked in great workplaces, you've worked in probably not as great workplaces, are there things that really separate the great workplaces that are set up for supporting people in this kind of way? What are those things that separate them from the workplaces that you go home and you're just like, I hate my job, and it probably isn't the job, it's probably like being in that place and all the factors, all the spaghetti.
I mean, none of them are going to be like revolutionary things, but it's kind of that, you know, access to natural light is so important. I mean, just being able to have that view of something, to see something different, especially if that can include green things. Literally, the color green of nature makes such an impact on our relaxation, our stress levels. Looking at water does the same thing.
I was just gonna say, as I'm looking at your just picture behind you, but I know that's a very real beach that exists. So
it is, yes. It's just about 30 minutes away from here. And so I decided, you know, when I was setting up my office, I would be on a lot of video calls, so I have to see my own background. So I wanted to look at something I liked.
I love it.
It's worked well. But, you know, having a space that you go to work in every day. And of course, we're talking about office. This, you know, doesn't really apply so much to warehouses and manufacturing, because I have worked a lot in those kind of facilities too. And that's really hard. I mean, because an industrial space, there's only so much you can do, right? To make it, you know, what we're talking about an office, completely different. So, but in the office space, you know, having the stuff that you need to be productive is also super important. So, you know, during COVID, when we were going back into the office and like open plan, that's such a popular thing. But like, I was so used to being at home where I could be on speakerphone, talking without headphones and kind of not worrying about my volume level and that sort of thing. Going into the office was really challenging because now all of a sudden, like, people are also on their own video calls and it was very distracting. And so then I'd say, okay, I'm going to go in a conference room. Well, then the conference room has the big TV on the wall, but it doesn't have, I need like multiple monitors now. I'm used to having 2 monitors plus my laptop. And so it's like those sorts of things that people are getting used to, different ways of working. So having like all of this different flexibility makes a lot of sense. And it's hard to shift gears when you're used to a certain setup and then you come in a different way. You know, the amenities are like table stakes now, of just knowing that you can get, you know, coffee, albeit, you know, I no longer drink coffee, by the way, which is funny that I've been able to like wean myself. I don't drink coffee anymore, which has been great. But having access to teas and things to drink to refresh.
There's nothing wrong with coffee. Just
No.
like anything else, it's understanding how it mixes with everything else and
That's
how it plays a role in your day. And
Right.
I'm a big decaf girl now with my Swiss Water decaf, which they have here at Industrious, and that's incredible. And a lot of people, you know, at first were making fun of me because they're like, why even drink coffee? But it's a movement. And, you know, I just love the taste of coffee. I don't need it for my energy because I try to optimize my nutrition and getting sunlight in my day and exercising, which, you know, brings blood flow to your muscles and energizes you and all the things that we, you know, hopefully know how to do. But I still love my cup of coffee in the morning, and there's nothing.
It's a ritual, right? I mean, there's something, you know, psychological about it that's not a bad thing at all. So yeah, that's good.
Anyway, so you were telling us just like stuff like amenities like coffee or teas and just having things available to make something feel.
I think the other thing is, you know, obviously having a place to work out is important. It's table stakes, even though I never really visited those places when I was at the office because, you know, working out in the middle of the day, this just doesn't work for me. Like you'd have to redo your makeup, your hair. Like it's too hard, I think, especially for women. Although there are women that do it, and I think that's awesome. It's just I couldn't get into that routine. What I've since come to find out, I've got to work out in the morning. Even though I'm not a morning person, I have to do it and get it in before the rest of the day gets away from me. And so really kind of carving that out and making that a priority to happen. But, you know, in the office, I think a big piece of all of these things to actually work is the culture. The culture has to be such that it's totally fine for someone to go take a nap in the afternoon or to have a rest time or, you know, to take a walk outside. Having meetings that are walking meetings. You know, that's obviously harder in the winter in the northern part of the country, but, you know, there are ways to add some movement and some variety into what you're doing and being very purposeful about that. But I think the organization really has to support that and has to have leadership really emulate that as well, so that it kind of resets some of the norms that junior people are looking to see, like, can we really do that? Or is that just, you know, a nice idea?
Totally having that feeling of almost permission that your job is not in jeopardy because you're going to take some time for yourself or to utilize the amenities that are provided. It's a huge thing we've been talking about it all this whole podcast since we started. It keeps coming up, and I think it's something we need to keep talking about.
Yeah.
My very last question for you is, I know you've had this major overhaul and your behaviors are so different now, and how you care for yourself, how you structure your day, but what's like one or two non-negotiables for you? And it sounds like maybe just like working out, getting that workout in the morning is one of them. But is there anything else that you're like, this is a non-negotiable for me, whether it's in the day or in the week, something you do to take care of yourself?
Well, for me, really being purposeful about the way I spend my time. I still manage my life with an electronic calendar. I always have. And the color coding of things has really been helpful for me to see how I'm spending the time in my day. And so I put even like my workouts and, you know, what I'm doing on the calendar, not so much of because I won't remember, but more of also a diary to track like what I'm doing. And it's a good visual cue for me to make sure that I'm not like out of whack on something. And so my morning routine is something that I've really, really been focused on from it kind of was the turning point of when I started my own company. I was like, okay, this is going to be a new way that I work. And so, and work my life. So, you know, I wake up, I get my coffee, my fake coffee now, and I go into some quiet time. And so that's that really truing back to what my purpose is. For me, I am a Christian and my prayer time is really important to me. And I have seen the impact of that, of really carving out that time to be mindful, to be in prayer, to just to have time to really get set and settled. First thing in the morning helps to kind of set the tone for my whole day and then go into my workout. And so like I've done some really good things for myself right off the bat in the morning, and it just kind of sets the rest of the tone of the day. And so it's like, okay, well, I'm feeling good. I've worked out and now I want to fuel my body well. I want to. So it's like all these things kind of like, I did one thing good for me, and I want to do another good thing and another good thing.
The domino.
It's a domino effect of good
Yeah.
things, as opposed to like, well, I did something good, now let me go eat a donut. Like those don't go together, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it just like when I start the day out right, and when I worked at United, that was the star flight is start the airline right, the acronym. And so I love that kind of idea, and I've used that for my own life of if you start your day out well, then it's easier to continue making good decisions the rest of the day. Versus if I jump out of bed like I used to jump out of bed, sleep as long as I possibly could because I had stayed up too late. So then I'm in a rush in the morning. I'm rushing through getting ready. I'm rushing to get to the office. I get there right before the first meeting. I'm dialing in while I'm grabbing my coffee and like some sugary carbohydrate breakfast bar. And that's how I would start my mornings. So it's a very different approach. So it's no wonder when I was like in that kind of rush, hectic mode, then that hectic kind of carried out the rest of my day. And I continued then to make poor choices. So
Makes sense.
really having that strong foundation in the morning for me has been very important.
Amazing. Well, I'm so happy to have had you on today to share all of this with the audience. I think, a lot of people will resonate with 2019 Carrie, and I hope plenty of people will resonate with your journey and where you are today in 2024, because it's amazing. And I'm so happy to see you happy and to hear about all the, the details of what's helping you thrive. So thank you. I know it's going to be really helpful for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And, my company is Transform Wellness. And so I work with individuals one-on-one. We set out a program together of identifying what your vision for the future is and then what goals that you want to work on to support that. I also do group coaching programs and speaking engagements. So if you've got a town hall, if you've leadership meetings where you're wanting to bring in some health and wellness to your team. And as a leader, it's really important, I think, to demonstrate that to your team members that you do care about their well-being outside of productive hours that they have with you. So
and I think those budgets are increasing too for health and wellness. And I think that a lot of people don't know where to spend those dollars. So bringing somebody in to help inspire people, to open their eyes to what's possible, those are all really incredible, beautiful gifts to bring into your organization. So I love that. So thank you. And we'll definitely link your website into the description of this video.
Great.
So go connect with Carrie, you guys, and we'll see you soon, Carrie. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Marielle. Bye-bye.